גם אשים... אוקיי, מעולה. So, אני אשים את זה פה. זהו. כן, זה כל ההרשמה וכל הפרטים, מה לעשות עם הילדים, וזה הקטע שהוא לא...
המון ביורוקרטיה.
המון, וואי, אני מתמודדת עם הביורוקרטיה הישראלית, ממש מייאש לפעמים. והשירות לקוחות לא משהו, את יודעת, אז זה קשה. זה הקטע שמבאס אותי, אבל אני צריכה כאילו... Hi, Yocheved. How you doing?
Hi.
So those of you on Facebook, if you prefer, you could join us on Zoom Torch. And you'll find us. The actual link is in the flyer. I'm trying to see, or you could just stay on Facebook because I don't have a way to post the link right now. So zeu. My kids are starting school tomorrow. And we had so much... Thank you. I'll start breathing again once they're in school. They're so bored. And the little one I'm not worried about. He's 4. And he'll probably catch the language fast. He'll make friends. I'm more worried about my 9-year-old to make friends and to learn the language. She really doesn't speak the language. So today we met up with 3 girls that are going to be in her class. They're actually here right now. And she's playing with them, and hopefully that will make it easier to go into the classroom. So
right.
two girls are twins that made Aliyah a year ago, and one girl is American-Israeli. She has the cutest English. She's speaking like this. She's so cute. So her parents are American, but they speak English to her, so she does speak English, which is nice. And they're all playing together, so I'm curious to know if that helps my daughter ease some of the anxiety, because she's been extremely, extremely nervous about it.
No, it will. You know, kids, it will take a little bit time, but kids get, you know...
They get adjusted, yeah.
It's
just that, you know, we went...
6 months, they will be Israeli.
Bezrat Hashem, I hope.
Because
we went...
It'll be fine.
Did you see my pictures? I went up north, and we went, it was my first time. My brother-in-law took me and my husband to the kever, to the cave, Me'ara, where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son hid for the 14 years when they were hiding from the Romans. That's really basically where the Zohar was written, in that cave, you know? And the actual carob tree that they ate from is still there. So it's so incredible. It's on the top of Ki'in, the top of the mountain. It's a Druze village, and it's very magnificent to be there. It's like you feel holiness. You feel something very special when you're there. So that is
inspired.
Hey, Clara, how you doing? I see Frida is on, but I don't see her beautiful face. I don't see Hannah's face, but I see that you're on. I see Clara, and I see Yocheved. I see Raquel is on live Facebook. And I needed to send more reminders to remind people of this. But basically, I will try to keep it on Monday, 10 o'clock live. And it will also be recorded, and it's on the Torch YouTube. On the Torch YouTube. So if you go on YouTube and you basically look on YouTube, you put in the search engine, you put Torch. All the classes that my husband and I give, they take them and extract them from the live Facebook, and it's stored in YouTube. So, hi Sarah Bram, how you doing? I don't see her, but I'm waving to her. She's waving to me. Awesome. So good to see all of you. Okay, so Lydia is here, and Sarah. Who is Sarah? Sarah Bazbaz? Okay. So it's so good to see everybody, and we're gonna Sarah, how you doing? So good to see you. So yeah, it was cool. We knew that this week we're gonna get the lift, and there was gonna be a lot going on. So we escaped for 2 days up north. My sister lives between Akko and Nahariya, so it's really beautiful. And we went to Miron, to Kever Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and we went to the cave where he hid which is about 40 minutes away. It was so magnificent. It gave us energy, recharged us for what we need to do is break down 100 boxes of a house in Texas and try to make it fit into an apartment in Israel. It's going to be a little miracle. We're having to buy a shed, like a little plastic machsan, like a storage place, because we don't have we don't have enough room in the house for everything that we have. The house, the apartment, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a 4-bedroom apartment, which is called here 5-room. And my big kids moved back home, so the rooms are all full. My 19-year-old and my 24-year-old are back home. And my married daughter, hopefully when she comes for Shabbat, it didn't work out for her yet to spend Shabbat with us because her husband, he works in a yeshiva and they have to host the guys. So I'm saying hi to Shoshana Isaacson, hi to Sharona and Sarah and Raquel. Okay, so what we do, this is an ongoing class that we've had going on for 8.5 years. Going on Monday, we called it Latte and Learn. We originally started meeting in Aroma Cafe in Houston, and it's 6 p.m. here in Israel. So email me or WhatsApp me, Houston people, that if there's another time that works better for you. I'm not married to the 10 o'clock slot. Like if later is better for you guys, let me know. 6 o'clock is a little bit hard for me, but Baruch Hashem, I have a lot of people to help me with the kids. So
I tell you, 6 o'clock for you, it's like when the kids need
right, when the kids need. Right now it's okay. My husband's here. And
you know, it's very hard.
It could be that I might move it to 8 o'clock my time, which would make it 12 o'clock, noon, and it's lunch. It might be easier for people to do like a lunch and learn. So I'll send out a WhatsApp reminder with like a survey to see if because I want to first accommodate the Houston people, because this was a Houston class, and Torch is very gracious to continue to help us and support us and pay for us to give classes through Torch. So I want to accommodate the Houston crowd, and it's obviously open. I see a lot of my friends from Israel and around the world. And we're going to dive into this week's Parsha, but I'm going to talk a little bit about last week's Parsha. See, I feel like when you teach Parsha on Monday, you're still connected a little bit to last week's Parsha, and you're going into the energy of the coming Parsha. The last 3 Parashot that we read were all about war. I feel like I went through a war the last few weeks. I've been just so physically taxing, and emotionally also. Like it's a war. It's like it's something we really wanted to do, yet there's a lot of bumps in the road, which are very normal. And there's a thing called a phrase that we say, the Talmud says, Eretz Yisrael niknet b'yisurim, that Israel is to live in the land, almost like the price that you have to pay is a certain amount of tribulation and challenges that you have to go through. And we have plenty of challenges in exile right now, so it's not like exile is paradise now, but it is certain bureaucracy and shopping and just life is a little bit easier in America, and I do miss it. I have to say, I do miss it. Today I went to buy school supplies for my daughter in a store that had literally 100 people. You have to mute yourself. I'm gonna see if I could mute.
Okay, yeah, boy.
Okay, 1 minute. I'm going to mute everybody. Okay.
Mute.
Okay, so I was in a tiny store with like 100 people, trying to find the right pencils and the right things, and I was missing Amazon today. I was missing Target, air conditioner. Shopping is just a different experience in Israel and in America. Nothing to compare. So with the last 3 parashot were all about war, going out to war. Ki tetzeh milchama, and the parasha before that was also the laws of the war, shoftim, like who could go out to war and what are you allowed to do in a war. There's rules when we go out to war. We can't just destroy everything. And now, why are these parashot usually that pertain to wars usually always read during the month of before Rosh Hashanah, around this time? Around the time that we're supposed to do teshuvah and do soul accounting, what we call cheshbon hanefesh. This is the time that we're reading about these physical wars. And it mentions it 3 times in 3 different parashot, that when you go out to war against your enemy, when you go out to war against your enemy, when you go out to war against your enemy. So then the Tivot Shalom says something beautiful. He says the Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, fights us in 3 different ways, okay? The Yetzer Hara, the most simple one, it's going to try to get us to do an Avera, to do a sin, okay? That's number 1. The second thing that it's going to try to get us to do is to avoid a mitzvah, right? Someone is calling, you see the caller ID, and it means someone is calling you, they want something from you, right? And you just ignore the call, right? You don't want to do the mitzvah. Or you tell your kids, tell them I'm not home, you know? That's avoiding the mitzvah. Doing a sin, we understand simply as doing an Avera, like speaking Lashon Hara, or stealing, or doing something improper, right? And the third way that the Yetzer Hara gets us is what we call Reshoot, where it tries to take things that are permissible within the realm of permissible, but not to elevate it, right? Because everything in our life can really, really be elevated. Everything we do, right? So I could eat, right? But I could really indulge in the food in a way that's called achila gasa, which is like forbidden eating, which is all about gluttoning and stuffing your face and eating till you can't move. Or you could eat, and how you elevate it is, and it's not that you're not allowed to eat, you're allowed to eat, but you're saying the bracha on the food, and you're saying in your mind you have the kavanah that you're eating it l'shem shamayim in order to get stronger, in order to get better, in order to get healthier, right? So every action can really be, every action of Reshoot, which is permissible, can be taken to an extreme, where it almost like sits on the border of a sin, okay? Sure. En baya. And, or it can be, taken to another level and transcended, okay? So the different wars that Israel went through was what was called milchemet mitzvah, where they had to go out to a war. They didn't really have a lot of choice. They got an email, you're going out to war tonight, okay? Then there was what's called milchemet Reshoot, right? That only the brave and the courageous can go out to this war. And if you had a fear and this and that, you were exempt. And then it was the other rules that we're talking about war was to keep your camp holy. There was a lot of commandments that v'haya machanecha kadosh, that there's tzniut, modesty that has to take place in a camp. Like you're at war, and someone needs to use the restroom, or they need to get dressed, that they need to do it in a proper manner. They need to keep holiness within the camp, okay? So Yetzer Hara, the way the evil inclination gets us, another way that it gets us, is it might take something that's really not okay, but it will rationalize it that it's actually a mitzvah, Let's say you have a really good, juicy Lashon Hara, and you're saying, it's Lashon Hara, but then your mind says, no, it's really a mitzvah. I'm doing this in order to warn the other person. By the way, there are specific laws when it comes to Lashon Hara that you're allowed to warn someone. Yeah, let's say someone is dating someone that's not going to be good for them, okay? So you're allowed in certain conditions, the Chafetz Chaim lists those conditions, and you are allowed to warn them, but it's very specific condition. It's not because, I need to vent, therefore I could do this Lashon Hara, And also you need to be careful. I remember a friend of mine in high school, it was like a year after high school, in Israel, girls start dating last year of high school, senior year, the Orthodox girls, and like a year or 2 after high school. And I never wanted to get married so young, so I started 2 years after high school. I remember my friend dating someone that I knew the guy, and I thought he was very flaky, and I didn't think he was good for her. And I said to her, I don't think this guy is good for you. they ended up, they're married, I'm married now 27 years, they're married 27 years, a few grandchildren later, and for a few years it was a very uncomfortable relationship with her because she knew I was opposed to this relationship. But sometimes, like, you have to be careful, because my reasons for thinking that he wasn't good for her, really looking back at it from a more mature mind, weren't such valid reasons, right? So even if you're going to warn someone for Lashon Hara, you need to really think it over and to make sure that you're really allowed to warn that person. And only if you have certain conditions met, you're allowed to do this Lashon Hara in order to save them, let's say, damage from a business deal with a partner that you know is not kosher, or a shidduch, or whatever it may be. So the way the Yetzer Hara gets us, we said, is by doing an Avera, convincing us to do a sin, right? Convincing us to get away from a mitzvah, a positive commandment, not to do it, avoiding a mitzvah, or, like we said, is rationalizing that a certain Avera is actually a mitzvah, okay? Oh, I really need to do this Avera now, because if I do this, I'll be able to really keep more mitzvot, right? And then your Yetzer Hara comes up with all these reasons why this is not really a sin, and this is really awesome, and rationalization, I would say, is one of the most dangerous things, you know? And I've seen this, you know, like with like relationships between the opposite sex. People say, oh, I'm just online, I'm just chatting, right? And really, if it's not your husband, you should not be chatting, right? And then you rationalize, you're like, oh, this is fine, you know? And really, one thing leads to another, and it's not fine, right? So we need to understand that when we go out to war, there's rules, right? There were 3 parashot leading up to this parasha that spoke about how to deal with the war, the different kinds of war, that where we're dealing with our evil inclination, it's a war. And you need strategy. That's what you need. You need tools. You need to be calm. You can't be hysterical. And the way to do teshuvah, soul accounting, is to really understand, look at your life, and try to figure out the pattern of how your Yetzer Hara gets you. Now, it could be something, and we spoke about this 2 weeks ago, where your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination, is actually a prison, and you imprison yourself. Maybe you have so much negative self-talk, okay, and wave your hands, and you could participate, like, let me know if that's something that you resonate with, is that the negative talk actually pushes you in a way that you don't really pursue things that you could probably achieve, right? So it might say to you, the negative voices, oh, you can't do it. Oh, that's too much. Or that's too hard, right? And that is Yetzer Hara as well. Yetzer Hara, one of the things that it's very good at is implanting doubt. When we have doubt in ourselves, right? That's where it really gets us. When we're vulnerable, right? When we have decisions to make and we're in a crossroad, that's where the Yetzer Hara really gets us, you know? And then if we fall, right, it tells us, you see, I told you, you really can't do it. You blew it again, you blew it again. And it gets you, and then you start buying into that belief. I'm really bad, I'm really awful. Instead of like what I always say, it's called a daily diet. Hey, Yafa. And
Hi.
you're the only one showing your face, so I'm happy to see a person.
I'm sorry that I'm late.
No, it's all good. So everybody else, I'm just seeing their name, and you're the only one I'm seeing a face, and it's awesome. I'm just going to mute everybody. So if you recognize the downfall, the strategy of your Yetzer Hara, it's like a war, the different kinds of wars and how your enemy works, right? You're going to be way better off in defeating your enemy, right? And as we said again, just repeating it real quick, is Yetzer Hara is going to be avoiding mitzvot, sinning, and taking the Reshoot and really kind of exaggerating with the things that are permissible and taking it to the level of desire, right? Because a lot of things are okay and permissible, right? And we could transcend them. Like, let's say a mom needs to go and rest and ignore her kids for 2 hours, but that's really necessary because she's recharging herself, right? Now that's totally okay, right? But if someone says, okay, I'm just like, I don't care for my kids. I'm going to ignore them for the rest of my life. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Going to be all selfish about it. So you're in what we call milchemet Reshoot. We're paralleling the different kinds of wars to the war against the evil inclination. And you're taking it, instead of transcending the permissible, everything, and what we're talking about a chassidut, is taking the mundane and making it ordained. That's what Judaism is all about. Literally, that's what it's about. And that's why we read all these wars, all these parashot pertaining to wars. So I want to give us all a bracha, that we should have atzlacha with the war that we're dealing with. We're all in a daily battle, okay? If it's a battle against negative thoughts, a battle against limiting beliefs, or it's a battle against what we said, permissible stuff, where we're just not paying attention, right? And we're just kind of going through life, surviving it, right? Instead of looking for opportunities where we could take the mundane and elevate it. And the other one was, which is a very dangerous one, is rationalizing an Avera and saying, no, this is actually really a mitzvah, you know? So that is the different ways the Yetzer Hara tries to attack us. So if we could recognize it, we could circumvent it before it comes. A thought comes, you're like, oh, I recognize this thought. This is one of those ugly thoughts, limiting thoughts, or trying to rationalize an Avera thought, or trying to get me to avoid to do a positive commandment mitzvah thought, right? So if you recognize it, you're bringing it up to your consciousness, you're already in a better place, right? You don't necessarily have to change just by bringing up to your consciousness, right, the pattern. You're already out of the pattern. This is what's so cool about it. A lot of times, you know, the Baal Shem Tov says, people think in order to do tshuva, you got to go, b'ivrit omrim, lishbor et hamidot. You got to go and break your midas. He says, do you know what happens when you go and break your character traits, your midot, when you go and break them? Hey, Shalamus. My aunt is on. Hi, Shalamus. Doda Shulamit. So, you know what happens? You know what happens when you try to break your midot, your midah, character trait? You get 2. Now you're stuck with 2 bad midot, right? Because now you're angry at yourself. You're trying to break. Let's say someone says, I want to conquer anger. And they get angry. And now they're going head to head with anger, right? So they're getting angry that they're getting angry. And they give up on themselves and they get more angry, okay? And I say it's like a diet. If you blow your diet, yeah, don't give up. You could start your diet in 2 hours again. So if you just raided your fridge, right? And you went compulsive, right? And you did biur chametz on your fridge, right? Lo shomim oti? Lo shomim tov? Oy. Okay, I'm gonna check technical difficulty. I'm gonna mute and unmute. I don't know if this helped. Did this help? Can everybody hear me? You're all muted, so I don't know. Can you hear me? Wave. If you could hear me, lift your hand. Yeah, you can hear me? Okay, great. Yafa shomim oti? Shomim oti b'Houston? Okay. As the next thing that we're going to talk about is something very beautiful that I read that Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs love. I love Rabbi Sachs. This is so classy and so royal, and his Torah is so deep. And he talks about in last week's parasha, and I'm touching a little bit on last week's parsha, and we're going to go into this week's parsha. He talks about there is an interesting law about the Isha Hasenua and the beloved woman, right? That if a man has 2 wives, right, and he loves someone more, someone is not muted, and I don't know where it's coming from, because, okay, 1 second, I'm going to mute. Okay, that worked. Is that better? Okay. And if he has 2 wives and he loves one of them, and he loves the other one but not as much, and the firstborn is from the one that he doesn't love so much, the Torah calls her Aisha Snua, the one that he hates, right? And he's not allowed to give the double inheritance. The law says that the firstborn gets it. He cannot give it to the firstborn of the beloved wife, right? Now, when you look at this law, it looks very straightforward. Like, okay, it's not nice to favor the beloved wife's children, and you should give the inheritance according to the justice, according to the law, according to the firstborn, according to the eldest, right? And Rabbi Sachs says something very beautiful. He says that, love is very, very, very powerful emotion, yeah? And love can build bridges, right? Love can make you feel wonderful. Love can bring you joy. But love, when it's taken out of context, and it could actually destroy and cause a lot of pain. So, like we're seeing that, let's go to Yaakov Avinu. And Yitzchak and Rivka. Rivka favored Yaakov, right? And we saw in a way that caused a certain problem for him, right? And he had to run away and escape because Esav was very, very jealous of him, also because he took the brachot. Then we see with Yaakov that he has this challenge, right? And he loves Rachel, really. And this is a very important thing. Who we love is not in our control, right? It's what we do with that, right? So he loved Rachel. He fell in love with her, right? He worked for her for 7 years. Then he was deceived, got Leah, right? And then he worked another 7 years, he got Rachel. And Leah, she really wasn't hated by him, right? But when you're seeing and you're reading the accounts of Leah, every one of her children, she named in response to this, how she felt about her relationship with Yaakov. Reuven, now he will see that I have a son and he will love me. Shimon, Hashem heard my answers. Hashem heard me, right? Levi, and then Yehuda, Pamodeh, I'm going to thank Hashem, I got more than my share, right? And she was always trying to get Yaakov's complete love for her, right? And it wasn't that he hated her, but when you love someone more, right, that makes the other person feel bad, right? It wasn't that he hated her, but she felt hated. It was her perception, okay? The hated part was coming from her. That's how she felt. That's not how Yaakov felt. Because I think that over time, Yaakov grew to love her, right? But he had this special bond with Rachel. Then what happened is, and this is where love could get you in trouble, because it's a very powerful emotion, was that he did favor Yosef, because Yosef was the firstborn of Rachel. Rachel, his beloved wife. And what happened there? The jealousy of the brothers upon Yosef, because they always felt that he favored him, he loved him more, right? So what Rabbi Sachs is saying, that when we're looking at this law, you don't just take it for granted. Oh yeah, of course, yeah, you should give it to whoever's the firstborn, right? A lot of times we might think that love surpasses justice. And really the Torah teaches us that love does not surpass justice. Justice first, then love. You got to do what's right, and then you have the emotion of love, okay? It's very important that we kind of have that in order. That's a really very important lesson, So we could find ourselves, let's say, where there's a day where you like one of your kids more. Shh, don't say that, okay? Because maybe one of them is listening to you more, or maybe you get along with one of them more, right? But you cannot go start doing what we call in Hebrew, aflayot, or protectia, right? You know this word in Hebrew, protectia? You can't do that because you're really shunting others out. But also the Torah is teaching us that the derech that Yaakov took to favor Yosef is not the right derech to go. That the Torah is teaching us justice first, okay? Before Yaakov died, he actually gave the Bechorah to Yosef. He gave him a special blessing, and he said, now Ephraim and Menashe are going to be like my own kids. And they say he gave the Bechorah to Yosef. But it's not a law that we learn from Yaakov. Now, the commentators explain it, that really the laws of the Torah started taking effect in the desert after they received 10 Commandments, after they received the Torah. So Yaakov, while he was giving the blessing before he died, was still in Egypt. So you could justify it. But that's why the law in last week's parasha is talking about the law of the Isha Snua and the beloved one is to understand that we don't learn this from Yaakov. Don't do it the way Yaakov did it. That's, okay? Many things we should do like Yaakov, but not that. So that's last week's Parsha. Now we're going to this week's Parsha. I'm just going to drink a little bit. I said a blessing before. So part of the challenges of moving, I have 100 boxes everywhere. Our lift from America came. And on top of that, our air conditioner is not working. So I'm schwitzing. It's very hard. Every day there is one thing that breaks in this house or not working, or it's been interesting. It's almost funny. It's almost like my husband and I, when something goes wrong, we laugh about it now. It's just so comical, you know? It's like, oh, okay, we got it. This is part of the Eretz Yisrael Nikned B'Surim. This is part of it, you know? Baruch Hashem. And you would think that I would be more positive than my husband because I'm Israeli. I grew up here. And my husband's the American one. But it's like a culture shock for me because I've been away 19 years. And I lived in Texas, which is also not even America. We have our own little country there, you know? We're used to space. We never had to parallel park, right? And it's very quiet. It's very awesome. People are super friendly, right? So here, people are awesome. They'll take their shirt off for you. They have a lot of chesed and kindness, but it's Israeli style. It's like you need to develop muscles, you know? And I've Americanized over the years, so I'm needing to develop those muscles. And I'm going through a culture shock, and I've been like a little bit down the last few days. I said to my husband, are we suicidal to start life again? Like my husband's 56, I'm 47. Like what were we thinking, you know? But then when we have our kids around the Shabbat table, and my granddaughter is here, and then it reminds me why I'm here, and my sisters are in Israel, and my aunt, and Baruch Hashem, you know? That's the reward of everything that we're going through. So we're diving into this week's parasha, is Ki Tavo, right? Talks about the laws of going into the land of Israel, right? Again, this is usually read around this time of year, for Rosh Hashanah. And with what I said, that all the parashot of war are read now, and now the parasha of going into Israel. What's the connection to the spiritual work that we're doing right now? The connection is that once we do teshuvah, once we do the soul accounting, but you do it in the right way, not in a way that you're destroying yourself, where shover midah and you get two of them, right? What's going to happen is you're going to make it to the promised land, right? And the promised land is a place of clarity. It's a place of self-acceptance, you know? Teshuvah, a lot of times people mistaken and thinks teshuvah is beat yourself up, a lot of musar, and that's going to make me a better person. Our generation is really doesn't work like that. And it's important that we know that about our kids, because our kids is a different generation. I had a beautiful Rebbitzin that taught that she called, the previous generation she called Dor Nechoshet. It's a copper generation. And you know how like if copper is like tarnished and dented, what you do is you give it a nice little bang from the other side, you fix it like that, and in order to make it nice and shiny, you know, you polish it, you scrub it, and it becomes shiny copper, right? This generation, she says, is Dor Zchuchit. It's a generation of glass. And it's important we know this because these are some tools to understand how we work. Because if we understand how our head works, it's going to be easier for us to fight the enemy. What we're talking about, going out to war against your enemy, you need to know your enemy. One thing about Israel, which is so incredible, I watched this series on Netflix about the Mossad. And you know that we have the best intelligence in the world. And what's so incredible about the Mossad is they really, really know their enemy. They build a profile of the enemy. And that's how we defeat our enemies, when we get intelligence from the inside, what they're planning to do, how they do it, what their behavior patterns are like. It's important to understand our behavior patterns and the behavior patterns of our evil inclination, because then we can work with it, right? I think our generation understands it, that we cannot teach children the way we were taught, right? And that we also ourselves need to teach ourselves in different ways. What worked maybe 20 years ago to inspire us, not necessarily anymore. We're used to a lot of stimulation. So it's important that you find what ignites your flame, right? And what's the difference about copper and glass is if I were to try to clean glass by scrubbing it, I'm going to get a lot of scratches on the glass, right? Or if I'm going to try to fix glass with a hammer, I'm going to break it, right? And we really have to deal with the next generation more tenderly. And how we do it is how do you clean glass? Is you take it and you rub it softly with something soft, right? And then it becomes transparent. And this generation, and by the way, I'm a little bit, I would say, maybe part of copper, but more glass, you know? I don't know where you categorize yourself. If you're like my mother's age, my aunt's age, you know? But I think that it's important to know even that because we're living, can everybody hear me? Yeah? In this time, we have a little glass in us, even if we think we're very, very copper, okay? So we have to be gentle with ourselves. And how you clean glass is if there's dirt on this, you could wipe it. And now I could see myself really good in the mirror like that. The way we work well in this generation is that we like transparency. We like to be open. We like clarity. Maybe what worked for another generation is, why do I need to do this? Because it doesn't work for our generation anymore. It wouldn't even work for me, and I'm partial copper, partial glass. It just doesn't. It needs to resonate. It needs to make sense, you know? And if someone is, let's say, there to help me to do cheshbon hanefesh, I want them to mirror my feelings. I want them to mirror my challenges, right? The way I would clean glass is the way I want them to handle me. I want them to be tender with me. I don't want them to handle me like copper, because if you do that with me, I break, okay? So we just have to realize that. And I lost train of thought. Oh, so in this parasha, one of the things it talks about is the Bikkurim. And there's a very interesting question about that the commentators ask about Bikkurim. We all know what the Bikkurim is, that we bring the first fruit during the time of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. We would bring that first fruit to the Beit HaMikdash. It would be the firstborn of our cattle, goes to the Cohen, and the first of the fruits would be taken in a basket to Jerusalem and donated to the Holy Temple. And the question is, what if we are giving this to like such a beautiful holy cause, why don't we bring the best of our fruit? What if the first of our fruit was kind of like little orange that was rotted and didn't look that great, but your second fruit really actually looked amazing, like a model catalog type of orange, right? So you would think, wait a minute, I'm making a basket right now for Beit HaMikdash. I want to choose the nicest fruits. It's like if you're ever making a mishloach manot for someone you're trying to impress, right? So you have mishloach manot where you're regifting. I don't know if you've ever done that, where you're just taking it, take the note off, you ran out of your own shalach manos, you prepared 70, and you've gotten 100. So at some point you're doing what everybody is doing, was recycling, right? But if you have a rabbi that you adore and love, you prepare a very impressive mishloach manot for him. And you know your rabbi loves shlivovitz, so you buy the best shlivovitz, and you know he loves tequila, so you get him a tequila, right? And you want to give him the best, right? So why would Bikkurim do we bring the first and not the best? Okay? So we need to understand the significance of the first, the significance of beginnings, okay? So everything that is the first and the beginning sets the tone for the rest. So we've spoken a lot, for people who've been with me for 8.5 years in this class, we talked a lot about the first thought of the day creates the tone for the day. Rosh Hashanah, they say we have to have positive thoughts, right? Not to get angry at family members. Yetzer Hara loves to get you, by the way, on Rosh Hashanah, and you could get mad about like the most ridiculous things, like the honey on the table and it's sticky, and right? So important on that day to keep your energy in check, because the way you behave on the first day of the year is kind of setting the tone for the rest of the year. The first sets the tone for the year. So like today I had a very, very stressful day. I almost like was gonna text everybody, say, I'm not gonna make it. And I was like, when I teach, I get a lot out of it. So I was like, oh, I'm going to miss it because last week I missed, and I didn't want to do that again. But also, here's the thing, that why was I so stressed? I was trying to create my daughter's first day of school tomorrow, and she's extremely, she's crying about it. She's very stressed about it. So I was coming up with strategies how to make the first day of school good for her. So we drove by the school so she could see where the school is. And then I reached out to some parents that she could play with the kids and meet them before school starts. Even though we've been here 3 weeks, we've been 2 weeks in quarantine and 1 week just running like chickens without our heads. So I didn't get around to it. And I said, you know what? Forget the house, forget the boxes. Today I'm dedicating to Shayna. Took her, got her a haircut. We bought nice shoes, and we got her something beautiful for her hair I want to make the first day of school to give it a good taste. Part of me was rationalizing and said, so what's a big deal? She'll meet the girls and things will work out, and she could always get the haircut in 2-3 days.